Hi, I'm Nikki Lynn, and welcome to Nikki Lynn Investigates, where I break down true crime cases, past and present, provide you with updates on cases that shook our communities to its core. Follow along as we delve into current events, breaking news, and criminal trials with facts, context, and clarity, all while applying legal principles. Are you ready to take a closer look?
This video may contain copyrighted material. The copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976 allows for fair uses for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. This video is intended for educational, entertainment, and commentary purposes. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute.
Detroit, Michigan man Desmond Ricks spent 25 years in prison for an unaliving, a crime he didn't commit. In 2017, after serving 25 years, he was exonerated and received a $125 million settlement under Michigan's Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act. Under this law, the state pays roughly $50,000 for each year someone is wrongfully incarcerated. His attorney, Wolf Mueller, told WXYZ in Detroit, Desmond Ricks endured the worst harm and suffering you can imagine. Under Michigan law, exonerees must repay compensation received through the Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act if they later recover damages from a third party tied to the same conviction. This process, known as clawback, allows the state to reclaim money it has already paid. So let's analyze both lawsuits and discuss whether or not Desmond Ricks should return any of his well-gained money. Desmond Ricks was 26 years old back in 1992 when he was accused and convicted of fatally shooting Jerry Bennett outside a Detroit restaurant. The weapon police recovered and stated was the M weapon belonged to Rick's mother. Ricks has always maintained his innocence and claimed police framed him by withholding evidence during the investigation and switched the bullets. Ricks would later receive help in clearing his name from the National Capital Crime Assistance Network, a nonprofit organization that helps those seeking justice. The founder, Claudia Whitman, along with law students, found critical documents and ballistic experts to help prove. Shown photos of the two bullets taken from the victim did not resemble bullets examined by a defense expert in the trial back in 1992. The bullets were still in police evidence and once examined showed they did not match the .38 caliber previously identified as the weapon. In 2016, the Innocence Clinic at the University of Michigan Law School asked to have the case reopened. Here are a few of my thoughts. First of all, Desmond Ricks unjustly spent 25 years of his life in prison, more than 9,000 days of his freedom stripped away. Most young people in their early to mid-20s are just beginning to make important lifelong decisions at that age. Decisions concerning their careers, family life, financial stability. But Desmond was denied this right. Desmond would miss 25 years of celebrations, birthdays, graduations, the birth of new babies, watching his own daughter grow up. He would miss final goodbyes as family and friends passed on. For 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, for 25 years, Desmond would be called 3 times a day for prison meals and roll call. This is not a selective process. You must show up even if you want to refuse your meal. Refusing your meal means your other options are eating items that you may have been fortunate enough to purchase from the prison's commissary. Those items usually consist of things you would buy from the corner store, like noodles, tuna, chips, Kool-Aid, coffee, snack cakes, at a marked up price. And I say fortunate, of course, if you have family and friends who could afford to put money on your books for 25 years. And obviously the dangers of being housed with others whose security levels may range from medium to maximum plus is a concern all of its own. The constant fear for your safety, the need to protect yourself, your property, your dignity. Maybe even forming alliances for your own protection. Waiting on the elusive letter that may never come. Placing calls to loved ones and waiting for someone to pick up. Waiting to use the shower or toilet because you have to share with at least 40 or more people. You're already locked down and away, but being locked down with no privileges for days because of the actions of others, like fights or contraband being found, makes it all the more worse. The list can go on forever. Not to mention the peace of mind that's stolen from your family for every day that you're locked away because they have no idea what's going on from day to day until they receive that call from you. So when Desmond Ricks' conviction was overturned after he spent 25 long agonizing years in prison, he and his family filed a $125 million civil rights lawsuit. I'm not sure I believe $125 million can justly compensate him for the time that he was wrongfully convicted and spent away from his family, but I understand the process in which they compensate $50,000 for each year that he was wrongfully incarcerated. So in a separate lawsuit where Desmond Ricks sued not the state of Michigan, but the city of Detroit for police misconduct, withholding evidence, and framing him, he was awarded $7.5 million after his case was reopened in 2016. After the Innocence Clinic at the University of Michigan Law School were able to show the bullets recovered from the victim did not match the pow-pow identified as the weapon used, more importantly, during the depositions taken during the lawsuit, the city's expert acknowledged that the bullet analysis by the police lab decades ago was flat out wrong. It was found out that the Detroit Police Crime Lab in 1992 fabricated a match of the autopsy bullets to match the pow-pow belonging to Rick's mother, and they switched the autopsy bullets with test-fired bullets so the fraud would not be discovered. We have forensic fraud, forensic negligence, framing. Ricks was obviously exonerated on June 1st, 2017, and won his settlement against the city of Detroit. The Detroit Police Department Crime Lab was shut down in 2008 after Michigan State Police found irregularities in the ballistic unit.
Spent a quarter century behind bars for a murder he was wrongfully convicted of has now been ordered to repay more than $1 million to the state. It is part of a Court of Appeals decision after a separate lawsuit paid him more than $7 million. This is a story I have been following for years. Back in 2017, our cameras were rolling as Desmond Ricks learned he would be released from prison. And today I talked with his former attorney and a state lawmaker in response to this latest move by judges. For roughly 25 years, Desmond Ricks was an inmate in state prison where he always maintained his innocence for the crime of murder. And then in 2017, a judge ordering his release, finding he had been wrongfully convicted. Ricks was among those who received $50,000 a year for every year of incarceration under the state's Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act, also known as WICA. For Ricks, it amounted to $1.25 million from the state.
Desmond Ricks endured the worst kind of harm and suffering you can imagine.
One of his attorneys at the time was Wolf Mueller.
25 years in a cage for a crime he did not commit. The compensation under the state, which was $1.25 million, doesn't come close to the harm that he suffered.
Ricks then won over $7.5 million in a lawsuit against the city of Detroit that accused the detectives on his case of corruption. That's when the state wanted him to repay their $1.25 million to the WICA fund. The law requires that payback is done if a third party issues compensation. In the case of Ricks, it was the city of Detroit. Ricks sued to keep the WICA money, but the state court said he could not keep it.
This was a bipartisan bill.
State Senator Joe Bellino from Monroe says the matter is more involved than simply paying out WICA funds to those wrongfully convicted and moving on. To be specific, after the state's fund ran low years ago, he says it's been even more critical to get money returned in the event Ricks and others also wrongfully convicted file suits against municipalities and police agencies and win.
There's no way in the world I would vote to let someone get that money and then get $7.5 million or whatever this person got in a law settlement. The state is not a huge bucket where people should be able to double dip every time there's a mistake made.
In this case, Rick's lawsuit was against the city of Detroit and two officers and accused them of falsifying evidence involving bullets back in '92. With dozens of similar cases, Mueller says it's time for WICA rules to be amended to allow former inmates to keep that money and any else they receive in a lawsuit.
No amount of money can make up for the harm of a quarter century and your entire adult life lost. So to say that the state paid you $50,000 per year, that's peanuts compared to the harm.
Wait, did I hear him correctly? Did the state senators say you shouldn't be able to keep money from the state based on a mistake? A mistake that was made? So let's analyze this. The state of Michigan wants repayment for a settlement for a wrongful conviction in which a man lost 25 years of his life, 25 years of gainful employment, a pension plan, paying into the Social Security system, medical benefits, and a retirement to look forward to, all while losing out on watching his daughters grow up, birthdays, celebrations, vacations, family achievements, all while fearing for his health and safety behind prison walls. The second settlement comes because of corruption and laziness and obstruction of justice, which occurred because a man was framed and evidence planted to quote unquote solve a crime, as opposed to looking for the real suspect. All the man hours spent on fabricating evidence could have been spent looking for the true, who's been free for 25 plus years. As Rick's attorney previously stated, the compensation doesn't come close compared to the harm he suffered. But what's truly egregious and most disappointing is the officers who framed Ricks and planted evidence will never be tried for their crimes. So finally, the state of Michigan states Ricks can't double dip, that he must repay them back under a process known as clawback. They claim if an exoneree recovers compensation from a third party tied to the same conviction, the state is allowed to reclaim the money if that person is paid. I'm not sure how much of Rick's money has already been spent. Whether he has a financial advisor, I'm pretty certain he'll want to treat himself to maybe a few things he missed out on while incarcerated. A car, a home, a well-deserved vacation. He's probably not looking to retain full-time employment as he's approaching 60 or better. He needs to set himself up a nice retirement plan, medical benefits. There are probably a few people who now depend on him for his help financially. He may have some bills he needs to pay. That being said, it seems only fair to me that since Ricks didn't frame himself, the only rightful people the state of Michigan should try to recoup $125 million from are those who set Ricks up in the first place. Those people who set him up to spend 25 years in prison at the expense of the state would be the Detroit police officers. This has been another episode of Nikki Lynn Investigates. Please like, share, and subscribe.